When we look at previous year's civil service question papers, especially ethics papers, what you will see is these common phrases: illustrate with examples, explain with examples. Oh, there's a very interesting phrase they used a couple of years back: narrate a real life incident. Now, this is something which is very challenging. Why? Because you have to give an example or you have to illustrate a certain point of view. And what I've seen in my personal experience coaching civil service students is, now they are able to write introductions, they're able to write conclusions, they're able to frame arguments. But the biggest challenge is how to substantiate those arguments, how to explain a line of thought with a certain example or an illustration. Now, this is where the challenge begins. Because in an exam situation, it's very difficult to think of examples. And besides, sometimes they ask you this real life incident. That can be really troubling. Why? Because you have to look into your own life and come out with a relevant example. So in this video, we'll be talking about how to give examples. What are the source of finding examples? And how many words to use, how many examples to give. Should I give one or two or multiple examples? Should each point be having examples? We'll be exploring these things. Examples, let's simplify them. When we say example, or when we see the word example in the question paper, what does it mean? What do you have to write in that example? Now, if you ask me, the word example represents either an event or an occurrence or a situation which is connected to that theme. For example, if UPSC asks you a question, illustrate something, illustrate the concept of integrity with an example. So you have to find an event or a reference or a situation where you actually displayed integrity, or an event which highlighted the value of integrity. So that's what examples means for us. It's very simple. It's nothing but a situation, event, or occurrence. That's what examples are. Before we get into the sources of examples, before we get into how to give examples or how to write examples, let's understand why do we need examples. Now, firstly, examples act as a source of evidence. For example, when a question is about establish a relevance of something, so you have to take a position, you have to justify a position, you have to argue with a certain line of thought. And when you're doing that, when you're arguing from a certain perspective, you have to illustrate it. You have to give me evidence that your line of argument is justified. So that is why we use examples. To justify a certain position, to make an argument relevant, we use examples or illustrations as evidence. So that's the first purpose. Remember something, the examples you give substantiates your line of argument, or rather, it provides evidence in support of your position. That's why we use examples. Besides evidence, examples are used also to clarify a certain concept. Suppose if the question is about discuss emotional intelligence as an ability. So when you're discussing emotional intelligence as an ability, you have to clarify the concept. Now let's put it this way. I'm an examiner, I'm an evaluator. I know nothing of the concept. So you have to explain it to me. So when you're simplifying something, when you're explaining something to me, obviously you will, along with the concept, obviously you will give me something in terms of example so that it clarifies the concept completely. So the purpose of example is to clarify a certain concept to the evaluator. Just assume, next time when you're giving examples, just assume that the person who's reading your script or the person who's reading your answer doesn't know a word about the concept. So simplify it for them. And to simplify, you will need to have some example, some illustration, because that's how it works. So the second purpose happens to be clarifying a concept. That's why we use examples or illustrations. Alright, now besides clarifying a concept, acting as an evidence for a certain line of argument, examples are also used to show the ability that you can apply a concept. For example, if there's a question on consequentialism, or if there's a question of cost-benefit analysis, let's put it like this. So you have to show to the examiner that you're able to apply that concept or the idea in a certain situation. So the purpose of example is also show your skill sets in terms of applying it. See, let me tell you something. When you write answers, you have to show to the examiner that it's not only about knowing the concept, it's also your ability to apply the concept. Now, this is what we call practicing a certain ethical principle. For example, if there's a question on integrity, you have to show that you're able to apply integrity in a certain situation. So the purpose of example is not only clarifying and giving evidence, but also about showing your skill sets in terms of applicability of the certain concept. So this is the reason we use examples. So let me give you a recap quickly. Now, when we talk about examples, you give examples for three reasons or three purposes. One, to clarify a concept. Second, to act as evidence. When you're justifying a position, examples act as an evidence. And third, most important, you're showing to the examiner your skill set in terms of applying the concept. That's why we give examples. I hope you understood these 3 points. All right, till now we explored why examples, what's the purpose of examples. Now let's take it forward. Let's explore source of examples. Where should I get my examples from? And if you ask me, my first source of examples will be my personal life. And you know what? In our lives, we have events. Like we go for family events, marriages, birthday parties, family visits. We go on family trips. And everywhere you learn something or the other. Oh, our school experiences. I'm sure you must have learned honesty in school through some experience. So our life is full of experiences. Your school life is full of experiences. Your university life is full of experience. For example, you're part of a literary club in your university or in your college. That club activities are a source of experience. And look at this. Even UPSC asks you for experiences, that too direct experiences. Look at this. There was a question in the year 2014. And it's a lovely question. And the question in 2014 was, in the context of defense services, patriotism demands readiness to even lay down one's life in protecting the nation. According to you, what does patriotism imply in everyday civil life? Explain with illustrations and justify your answer. You know, the key phrase in this question is according to you. So that means UPSC itself expects you to give your life experiences. Oh, let's take one more question here. In the year 2013, there was this question. What is meant by crisis of conscience? Narrate one incident in your life when you were faced with such a crisis and how you resolved the same. Now, if you look at both the questions, I'm asking personal experiences. So you need to give me your experience. And in fact, if you look at your life very seriously, whatever you are, whatever good values you have cultivated or whatever good character qualities you cultivated, it's out of some experience. And we all learn something from experiences, good experiences, bad experience, that's what we learn. Oh, for example, you lie at home once, you get slapped, you learn that I should not be lying next time. For example, you bunk college and you get caught. That's where you learn lesson that I have to be more committed to my studies. So every event in life leaves with some learning or experience. Oh, for example, you fail once. When I say fail, I'm not talking about academic failure. For example, you fail once in some big event. For example, you're a sports person. You play a finals of a tournament. You lose a match. You learn an experience. The next time I have to come back strong. Next time I need to be better prepared. So everywhere in our life, we learn something or the other. And I want those experiences. Oh, I have a word of advice for all of you. Don't fake your experiences. You'll get caught. Be genuine, be original. It always helps. So first source of examples happens to be personal experiences. Besides personal experiences, we can also use events, historical events, and current events as a source of examples. When you study history, say world history, or say modern Indian history, it's full of events. French Revolution, a big event. Russian Revolution, a big event. Non-cooperation movement, event. Gandhi March was an event. You can use these events. And sometimes UPSC itself, in the question itself, there's a hint that you can actually allude to a current event. For example, in the year 2021, there was this question. And the question was, refugees should not be turned back to the country where they would face persecution or human rights violation. Examine the statement with reference to the ethical dimension being violated by a nation claiming to be democratic with open society. If you look at the question, it talks about refugees. And refugees are very topical, it's contemporary. So we can use today's events as examples here. Let's take one more question. In the year 2014, there was this question. It's often said that poverty leads to corruption. However, there's no dearth of instances where affluent and powerful people indulge in corruption in a big way. What are the basic causes of corruption among people? Support your answer with examples. Now, corruption, it's everyday news, not only in India, everywhere in the world. So you can use event, newspaper event. So that's the second source of examples. You can allude or refer to history or current events, and that makes lovely examples. And when you read questions itself, you should be able to make out, okay, in this question, I should be able to use a current event as an example. Or in this question, I should be able to use history events, historical events as an example. So along with personal life experiences, historical events, current events also makes wonderful source of examples. So remember something, use your current events knowledge. You read newspapers next time onwards, when you read newspapers, identify, oh, this is an event I can use. Or when you study history, oh, this is an event I can use as an example. So second source of examples are events, current events or historical events. Let's consider 2021 quotation. And this quotation was from Swami Vivekananda, and it read somewhat like this. Every work has got to pass through hundreds of difficulties before succeeding. Those that persevere will see the light sooner or later, Swami Vivekananda. When you read the quote carefully, you will see the word persevere mentioned. And perseverance is a great character quality to have. And when you're explaining this quotation in the exam, you'll first explain the meaning of the word perseverance, what exactly is perseverance. Then you have to give an example for perseverance. Example in terms of who personified the quality of perseverance. And this is where the next source of example comes from. That is personalities. If I am writing answer for this quotation, I'll prefer to use somebody like Milkha Singh. He persevered, he showed the determination to rise up in life. Or probably I'll use this young girl called Purna. She was the youngest girl or youngest woman to climb Mount Everest at the age of 13 years, 8 months. Grit, determination. It's a perfect example. So that's why in some questions which deals with virtues or values, you can use these personalities as great examples because they reflect those qualities. So besides historical events, besides personal life experiences, try to use personalities also. For example, if there's a question on integrity, Abraham Lincoln makes a wonderful example. For example, if there's a question on forgiveness, Nelson Mandela makes a great example. Because all these people reflected those qualities. So that's why I try to use personalities also as examples. They make great examples, especially when it comes to values and virtues. We all watch movies. We all watch cinema, award-winning cinema. And you know what is interesting? Every year, Government of India gives out something called National Awards for Cinema, where best actors are awarded, best directors are awarded. There's something called best cinema, best movie of the year also. We have Oscar awards also. You know, cinema is a lovely example. And besides cinema, leave cinema aside, there's something called Nobel Prize for Literature. And all these writers, their works can be cited as examples. And these are people about whom you read in newspapers, you watch their movies. They can be a great source of examples. For example, I know some of you must have, most of you must have, not some, most of you must have seen this movie called Neeraja. It's a true story of a cabin crew girl. who sacrificed her life. Now that cinema, that movie, Neerja, is a wonderful example for bravery. So you can use cinema also. You can refer to national award-winning movies, you refer to Oscar award-winning movies, you can refer to Nobel Prize-winning writers. They all make wonderful examples. Oh, you can use short stories also. Oh, I'm sure all of you must have read short stories in your school, college days. You can refer to some of their short stories. Premchand short stories. They always have some moral lesson at the end. You can use these short stories as examples. Only trick here is you have to learn to summarize them in a matter of 20-25 words. Just a short, quick summary. Refer to the novel, refer to the short story, or refer to that particular cinema. And just mention. And learn to connect it with the theme that you are answering. Learn to connect it with the question that you are answering. It makes perfect sense. So diversify. And next time when you watch a cinema, next time when you watch a movie, remember to use it also. Remember the key event which exemplified a certain value, which exemplified a certain virtue, which exemplified a certain moral perspective. You can use it. So cinema also makes a great source of examples. Literary works also makes a great source of examples. Now that we explored the sources, and let's move on to the next step. Now, you have a complete list of examples from your personal life, from history, personalities, cinema, literature. You have a complete list. Now, the question is, where will you use it? The trick here is to align the sources to the theme, to the question, to the demand of the question. Now, that's the next thing we'll be exploring. If you look at the questions very carefully, if you read the questions very carefully, the question itself gives you a hint what kind of example is to be used here. Let's take 2014 question. In the year 2014, there was this question. In the context of defense services, patriotism demands readiness to even lay down one's life in protecting the nation. According to you, what does patriotism imply in everyday civil life? Explain with illustrations and justify your answer. If you look at this question, the key word is according to you. At the moment you read this phrase, according to you, you have to give an example from your life, your personal experience. So whenever you see this you perspective questions, simple, your life, your personal experiences. Let's take one more question. Non-performance of duty by a public servant is a form of corruption. Do you agree with this view? Justify your answer. This was a question in 2019. And if you see the question carefully, there's a word called public servant. So that means here you have to give an example from public servant perspective or public service perspective. So that's why when you're giving examples, read the question carefully. What is the demand of the question? And if the question is from personal perspective, give personal examples. If the question happens to be civil service perspective or public service perspective, use public service examples. Or if the question does not have any one of these perspectives, then give a general example. You can use historical events, you can use cinema, general events, general things. So the kind of examples you're going to give, it's completely connected to the question and the perspective of the question. So keep one thing in mind. Next time when you're figuring out what example to give, read the question carefully. When you see the words you or public service, if you don't see any of the words, then keep it general. That'll be my advice. Now that we have understood sources of example, and we also understood where to give what kind of examples, what perspective and what examples, let's come to the last key part of this whole thing. Everybody has this question. How many examples per question? 1. Second, what should be the word limit for my examples? Now, here it's completely your discretion. Completely your discretion. Because you have a word limit of 150 words. So plan your examples accordingly. Let me give you a rule of thumb. Keep the word limit as your guideline. And you have to write your introductions, you write your body, you write your conclusions. So introduction and conclusion itself will take up somewhere around 35 to 40 words. So you roughly have 110 words. Now in those 110 words, you have to plan your examples and your arguments very carefully. Now please remember something. Examples per se, examples in itself is not going to get you marks. It's the explanation of the concept that's going to get you marks. So focus on the concept, then you come down to the example. And ideally speaking, 20-25 words is a good word limit to give examples. Because you need to remember that you need to write your introduction, you need to write your conclusions, and you have to explain the question also in the answer. So you're short of word limit. Suppose you end up writing a 60-word example or a 70-word example, then where are the words left for introduction and conclusion? So that's why a rule of thumb, keep the word limit in mind. You have 150 words, 30-35 words goes for introduction and conclusion put together. The body comes in. Now this is where you're left with, say, 120 words. That's where you plan. Suppose if your argument gets over quickly, say 40 words, you are left with 40 words. So play with the examples there. So the word limit is completely in your hands. The number of examples, suppose for example, if you're able to give 2 examples in 50 words, fair enough. If you have the word limit, go with 2 examples. If you don't have the word limit, stick to 1. And remember this big tip I'm giving you. It's not the examples that's going to get you marks. It's the arguments. And remember something, examples are no substitutes for arguments. Your arguments comes first. Your point of view comes first. Your line of thought comes first. Next is the examples. So that's why don't focus more on examples, focus more on your line of argument, and examples come secondary. So that's why when you're writing it, remember the word limits and remember your key marks, the marks which you're going to get is usually for the line of argument. And example comes next. Keep it to 20-25 words, good enough, and use your discretion. Use your discretion. So this is what my advice will be. Follow us to learn more about DS4. Happy studying. See you soon. Yeah.